Hello and welcome to Aspiring Leadership, making the move into leadership. Each week, we'll be chatting with various leaders from all different walks of life, learning from their experiences and sharing their advice. It's the perfect podcast for somebody wishing to step into a new leadership role or for a leader who's already there, wishing to continue their development. Please like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. Hey everybody, happy Thursday, and you're very welcome along to this week's episode of Aspiring Leadership, making the move into leadership. We're up to episode 12. So we're coming near the end of season 1, which will end in a couple of weeks, and then we'll take a break for the summer and then come back again next autumn winter with a second series, and I'll have a think about it over the summer and reflect on areas that we can improve the series, make some little tweaks, and then come back with a fresh new look and some more guests again next winter. So looking forward to that. Likewise, like I say every single week, I'm so grateful to all the people who are listening to the podcasts, thousands and thousands of downloads at this point. The guests who are making it every week, every guest has been so different with such fantastic stories. Thanks so much to last week's guest, Susan McLaughlin, who you can reach out to through LinkedIn, who shared a lovely story about her journey through her retail career, but then her pivot into the coaching space. And she has a lovely blend of commercial awareness with the softer skills of a coach. So I think she's a fantastic lady and a great guest to have. So thanks a million, Susan. Not going to speak a whole lot this week. As usual, please, if you could, like the podcast, share it on social media. A quick review on, Apple Podcasts or LinkedIn makes a massive difference. If you're watching on YouTube, it takes 2 seconds to just hit the subscribe button there below. All of those things actually dramatically help the podcast and help to push it up in people's feeds, and will continue to increase the listenership. So I'm hugely grateful for that. And it's for the guests, because as I've said so often, it's so hard for any person to come on here and speak vulnerably for 30-40 minutes about their life and their career, and I don't know what I'm going to ask them before the show starts, and they don't know what I'm going to ask them either. So it's always great, and again, hugely grateful for that. So, as always, this week's coaching question. Imagine for a moment that you're at your 80th birthday and you're sitting around. I want you to think about who'd be there and what would they say about you. If somebody who you really respected is going to be at your 80th birthday and they're going to read out a paragraph about you, what would you like them to say in it? And just think about that and help it to begin to shape your mission statement and what you're working towards in your life. So again, it's your 80th birthday. Who'd be at the birthday, and what would they be saying about you? So that's what I'd like to throw at you this week. And if you're out at the weekend, as I always say, or perhaps you're sitting on your couch next Tuesday or Wednesday evening, it might just pop into your head. Or even if you have 5 minutes at work and you want to type away on a Word document, it's always useful to take the thoughts that are jumping around in your head and write them down, because it'll help you be clearer, and it'll also just take the jumble out of your mind as well, so you can be successful going forward. All right, on to this week's guest. So one of the reasons I don't want to speak too much is that this week's chat is a longer one than usual. It's with a good friend of mine and neighbour across the road, Stephen Byrne. And Stephen has like all the guests, has had a varied career. He started in finance and banking. He worked a lot with the youth, and he's now a career guidance counsellor, and he's had many different roles throughout that period. But he's also been in leadership positions, and we speak about in our chat about career guidance from his perspective, from a leader's perspective. We speak about the different types of leadership styles, and we also talk a little bit about working from home, to mention just a few things. It's a really good chat. Excited to share it with you. And Stephen is a neighbour of mine, and we often have these types of chats out on the cul-de-sac. So it was lovely to actually take the time to sit down together and record it. All right, good stuff. Hey, Stephen, what's the crack? You're very welcome to this week's podcast. I appreciate you giving up your time and coming to have a chat with us. So let's get straight into it. Tell us a little bit about who you are, Stephen, your background, and what you do right now.
Hi, Colin. Thanks very much for having me on the channel and kind of very best of luck with it. My background, I'm a career guidance counsellor and I work for a company called careersportal.ie. That's the main site that Duro look after. And what I do is explore options of education, training, employment for career with people. That's both one-to-one and that's in groups as well. It's really starting where someone is at, getting the sense of where they are at, where they would like to get to, and supporting and exploring the journey from where they are to where they're looking to get to. In a nutshell, I suppose that's really what I do. There's elements of kind of digital work with clients through myfutureplus.ie, which is part of careersportal.ie. And there's also kind of engaging and supporting clients as well as part of that work.
Okay, so very much leadership in the theme of what you do, you know, helping people to lead them in a certain direction in their career. How did you end up getting into that? It's in some regards, I'd imagine, a calling as opposed to a profession.
I suppose like a career, the words job and career often get kind of intermingled with each other, I suppose. My journey, I suppose, like I used to work in banking and I used to teach quality, 6 steps to Sigma. So it was always reflective in the work that I did. Um, People and supporting people is the constant that has flowed through all the work that I have done. Um, After working in banking, I moved on to work in youth work. I work with 12 to 18 year olds in a justice capacity in Garda diversion projects and exploring a person's situation. It was building a relationship, building a rapport, and exploring steps to support them, to help them achieve, and so on in their particular kind of context. That was working with families, that was working in communities, and that was exploring options of individual and group work as well. So, in answer to your question, I suppose people has been the constants in the work that I do, and exploring from a starting point to something and the journey in between. Moving on from youth work, I went back and I qualified as a guidance counsellor, and I moved into working with the justice population. That's both people who were coming out of prison and people who are on community service. And that was very much in one-to-one placement support capacity and exploring options of education, training, and employment for people who had a previous offence history and so on. From that, I moved on to be an education training board guidance counsellor in further education and training settings. And I was working specifically in that role with 16 to 25 age group. And despite being about 9 years, that's a wide expanse, I suppose, of clients and so on. So as you can see, the actual kind of common thread within, I suppose, is people, is one-to-one work and client work and group work. My current role, I'm working as a guidance counsellor in Careers Portal. That's for careersportal.ie. And I have kind of taken the step back in that what I do is I support people who support people. So now I'm working with guidance counsellors, I'm working with advocates, I'm supporting them in terms of training, in terms of reflecting on what they do and how they do it. And I am exploring options of the support that they need to reflect on the work that they do. And likewise, I do research and I work as part of the team to support careersportal.ie, the website.
Mm-hmm.
But I suppose in answer to your question, Conal, how I got into guidance and my transition through it, how I got into it, I was always reflective on my own career and my own pathway. Like everyone else out there, I had that what if, what's for me, where might I start? So I always equate career guidance to, it's like when you're lost somewhere, you pick up your phone to your mate and you're like, come here, I'm trying to find Henry Street. They're like, well, okay, that's where you're trying to get to. Where are you now? I'm on O'Connell Street. All right. When you have them 2 points in space, this is to break career guidance down quite simply. When you have them 2 points in space, your starting point where you're currently at and where you're trying to get to, you can begin to form a way of how am I going to get there? Am I going to walk? Will I have challenges along the way? And which steps am I going to take to go from where I'm at, who I am now, to that person or that destination in the future? So that's how I kind of, that's how my thinking in relation to kind of guidance involves. So guidance is the process in between. Mm-hmm. It can be unpacking with someone. Who am I? Reflecting on the type of values, interests, personality, skills, ability, confidence, self-awareness, and so on, to get a sense of the person. But also, I suppose, then exploring the other destination point where a person would like to get to, their goal, if you will. Where might they see themselves in the future? What they see themselves doing? What their picture is of an achievement, a development, progress for them. And breaking down, how do I go from who I am to who I want to be? So that's how I've come to understand. I mean, a guidance counselor uses a counseling approach, tools, client support elements, and different kind of counseling models to be able to listen, understand, and connect knowledge with a person. It might be revelatory in that someone might be like, I never thought of that. Or it could be like, yeah, that's what I've always kind of thought of, but I never had the confidence to really, or I'd love to do this, but there was that. Mm-hmm. I wanted to do this, but there was, so through counseling skills and engagement and talking through someone, gradually a narrative, a story becomes different steps. Them different steps become actions, and them different actions build up step by step into a plan of, I'm going to start here. I might need support with this. I need a little bit of help with that. I'm okay with that. And gradually these build towards a particular something.
I hadn't planned to ask you this, Stephen, but as you were speaking there about career guidance, right, the thought occurred to me. I remember back when I was in secondary school, and you'd hear of other students going to career guidance counselors, and they'd come back and they'd be like, I was at a career guidance counselor. He told me I needed to be a gardener, right? What do you say to those people that get mad advice from a career guidance counselor that's in a complete different direction than maybe the teacher or the guard or the nurse that they had considered?
I suppose it really, like, I come from a background of plumbers. Like, dad was a plumber, brother was a plumber. So I don't quite know what happened to me. But what I took from that is a toolbox. So same as, like, guidance for me is a trade. It's supporting someone using a toolbox. So in answer to your question, some guidance counselors rely quite heavily on psychometric assessments, your DATs, your differential aptitude tests, your cognitive aptitude tests, and so on. And that basically, this test equals person's destination. Fair enough. I mean, does any test in the world fully guarantee that I should be a gardener, or I shouldn't be a Garda, or I should be this, that, and the other? To me, I suppose your question was, how do I feel about that? I suppose to try and get the best understanding of a person that you can, tests will give you a piece of the jigsaw. Reflective space or reflective exercises will give you another piece of the jigsaw. That's both for the guidance counselor, but also for the person. Because I feel it's a collaborative process between me and the learner, the student, the adult, the client, the person, whichever context you're in. So psychometric tests are part of it, but they're only a piece of it. Listening to someone talking through, filtering, enabling a person to basically go off and do a bit of research about a gardener or a guard, or so a person's active within the process, active within their learning, and so on. So they go, okay, well, the test said gardener, but I quite like being a guard, or quite like being a nurse, or I would prefer to be a this, that, and the other. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if someone doesn't go off and do the research, either they don't feel confident about it, they're not too sure how to do it, or there sometimes isn't the actual kind of buy-in to the particular something. So that's a kind of other parts of the toolbox. So in answer to your question, I suppose, um, how do I feel about someone being directive and telling someone what they should be? I don't agree with that,
Okay.
because no one knows your life like you. A person can give you advice, can lay out options for you, but ultimately, for a guidance counselor to be telling someone, or any kind of practitioner, life coach, guidance counselor, to be telling someone, you can use immediacy, fair enough. Like, what's going on in the room, you can basically go, well, my understanding is gardener sounds to be like, but you check in with the client and say, well, what do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, the person that's going to be at a bus stop at 7:30 in the morning, or in a van at 7 o'clock in the morning, is going to be that person. So it's important for them to be an active chooser within their own pathway, you
Big
know.
time, yeah, I agree with you. Also, what's coming to my own mind there is there's a mindset shift on on the side of the client there too. I know, like 10 years ago, if you had said to me, "Oh, you got to find a job that aligns with your values and your strengths and who you are and makes you feel happy," I would have told you you're talking nonsense. But now I'm very lucky that I actually am working in that space that completely aligns with who I am, and it doesn't feel like I'm going to work. That might link us a little, just to reflect a small bit there, Stephen. From a leadership perspective, one of the big roles of a leader now is to develop their people and help them to identify career moves. And there's a huge amount of stuff that you're advocating there, leveraging different tools, linking, joining the dots, guiding them, and it being a collaborative process that would assist the leader. Tell me a little bit about, we had a real, Stephen is my neighbor, by the way, and we had a fantastic conversation on the doorstep not so long ago about different leadership styles that you would come across and how that relates to yourself, Stephen. Tell me a little bit more about that.
I suppose really I'll split it into two parts, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
There's the general kind of definition of a leader, which is knows the way, shows the way, leads the way. Fair enough. I think it's a bit more nuanced than that, in that a leader for me, again, speaking from my own experience, I've been a supervisor, a manager in a general way in kind of projects and so on. But likewise, I have been an active leader as part of, like, in a client process, like, working with a person. Um, in my earlier years, I suppose and the earlier developments and my experience of leadership, I would have seen leadership as very directive. I go to leader, they say what to do, leads the way, knows the way, overseeing, very much a supervisory element of it. I suppose as I've reflected on leadership over the years, it really kind of breaks into three approaches for me. Um, Leading from the front, very directive, very throwing people on your back, task focused. Let's get to the end. Follow me. I know the way. Come on, let's go. Very front focused, very kind of directive. There's side by side, which is collaborative, empowering, engaging, capacity building. Let's work together as a team. Roles can be assigned. We're going to trust people to do their role, to row in as part of the team. Let's work together to get to the goal. And there's some leaders that lead from the back, that are very much like a touchstone, a touch point, really. Um, but they very much front load their team and say, I trust you to do this particular kind of task. I trust you to be in this particular role. Away you go at it. If you need that, and come back to me. Otherwise, I'm trusting you as a team in your role as part of this project to work on deliverables, the different things that you're going to do. Come back to me if you need. Otherwise, I'm going to leave you at it. So there's them three. So there's the leading from the front. There's the working side by side, kind of a little bit kind of hands on and so on. and there is someone who leads from the back.
Which is the best in your mind?
It very much depends on the context that you're working in, the culture that you're working in, as in, the overall kind of situation that you're in. It can come down to the actual task. Sometimes it would be nice. You might have a task that you have to deliver in 2 weeks. It would be nice to say to everybody, okay, everyone's going to take a little bit of this, and this, you know, and to develop people, to rotate roles so everyone gets experience. It very much depends on the time, the task, the project, the culture, but also you as a leader, how comfortable you are with giving over control, autonomy, power, trust to the people that you're working with. Because with leadership, sometimes we do live in a metric world. There's all key performance indicators, there's goals, there's outcomes, there's key milestones, there's all that kind of stuff. Some leaders can equate running across the finish line as showing their value. It very much depends on you as a leader as to what you're comfortable with. Whether you go, okay, I'm the person, the go-to person in my context, because I've got a particular name above the door. Or if you're have built up your experience, your trust within your team, within your role, within yourself, within the security of the role that you're in, to be able to evolve your leadership style. Because like everything, leaders aren't born. Leaders are developed. People who don't think they're leaders or never think that they could be leaders read a book on it and say, okay, which leadership style is going to suit me? It very much depends on you. Like there's loads of different websites, there's loads of different books you can read on being a leader, steps to being a leader, and so on. Your leadership style will evolve over time, as mine has. Like mine, in my career, I suppose, evolved from being part of a team, from being a project leader, to being a supervisor, and so on. So I suppose it's evolution of you as a leader.
It's definitely from all the leaders I would have spoken with over the last couple of months, it's about balance. Well, one thing that's coming true to me there, and it's something that I would have picked up from people I've been lucky to coach as well, is that it's probably not the best thing if you're getting your gratification from your results, because ultimately you need to be able to value yourself intrinsically as a person and get your gratification from there. Over the last year, socially distanced, of course, we've had good conversations out on the lawn, on the street, about working from home. And I've always been taken by your knowledge around it and some of the good tips you've shared with me, which have benefited me in that regard. It'd be brilliant if you could share with the listeners some of your insights there around working from home and what's beneficial.
Oh, the last, 12, 18 months, going on maybe kind of 12, yeah, realistically 12, 14 months have been a big challenge. Like, it's been very difficult for people balancing all, one, keeping safe as a person, two, exploring kind of challenges in terms of a work context, and three, I suppose, exploring. I talked about the toolbox at the start of this, exploring new tools, getting comfortable with the likes of, as we're on now, voice over internet protocol, whether it's Zoom, Microsoft Teams video, figuring out, am I on mute? Am I not? Is my video on? All that kind of stuff. Like, navigating this new normal that people keep talking about, So people have faced a number of different challenges and so on. I suppose for me, I was a bit like everyone else, a little bit aware of Skype, FaceTime video, but it was very much recreational, just talk to friends who were distant and so on. I'd only begun considering that in a research paper that I was doing towards the end of 2020. Sorry, it's the end of 2019. Mm-hmm. And then suddenly this kind of future research paper became, okay, that's what we need to do now, So I suppose there were the 5 pieces of reflection that I have on, I would say, from personal experience, I would say ergonomics and posture are quite important. from working from home. When you are working from home, you're in a fixed position. So it's important to look after back, neck. It's important, I suppose, to moving on from that a little bit to look at your work-life balance and so on. If home becomes work and work becomes home, where do you draw the line? How do you have a differentiation between me, the worker that's available between X and Y, and me, the person who lives my life outside of my work hours and so on? Kind of leads on to my third point is access and availability. Just because you are and can be available on a Zoom or a Microsoft Teams and so on, does that kind of blur the lines of when you start work and when you finish work? If you have different social media apps, ways of kind of contacting you and messaging you and so on, where does the line start? Like, where does you as the worker, as the leader, as the stop, and where's the boundary of you as a person? So that kind of access and availability, that's quite important to have an idea of as well. I suppose from a cognitive point of view as well, when you're on, there's been a thing called Zoom fatigue, Microsoft video fatigue, Microsoft Teams video fatigue, is when you're trying to concentrate on a video on a screen. Because if we were just in a room talking away, there will be less concentration. Because what our minds, when we're working with technology, trying to do what we would do normally, our mind is almost working overtime to look at what am I appearing as, who am I talking to, what are the visual cues and so on. So there's a lot going on. There's a cognitive load there on people when they're engaging over different mediums, whether it is SMS mediums, telephone, VoIP, Zoom, Doxy, Microsoft Teams, GoToMeeting, all these other different types of things. So there is that kind of focus fatigue, because you might see a client, I mean, from a leadership point of view, you might do a team meeting in the morning with, say, 20 staff or up to 100 staff over Zoom, and you're trying to focus on 100 people, 100 things at once in a confined space, and you're trying to do what you would normally do in a boardroom or in a particular workflow and so on. You might be working with the likes of an Asana or a Monday.com or Microsoft Teams, and you might be trying to keep everything kind of going along in your leadership style, whether that's from the front, whether that's side to side, or whether that's from the back. That's a lot. If you look at it, like in terms of working from home, and that's to say nothing of, you might be caring for relatives, you might be recovering from a particular situation, or you might be homeschooling. So I suppose that's a huge, the last year has been a huge challenge for people. As well as that, it has led to a lot of leaps forward. We can do this. We can work from home. Do we need to hop in a car for an hour and a half, 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day? Depends. It very much depends on yourself, your situation, your context, and what it is that you do. So we're all starting to question this fourth industrial revolution they keep talking about, in that the kind of digital development of how I engage with people and so on. So we're all starting to go, okay, the last 12 months have been very difficult, but it's pushed us forward 5 years, 10 years in terms of the evolution of teleworking, digi-working, whatever you want to call it. I suppose the last point that I would say is your value. One of the important things of working from home, what I've seen over the past 12 months is a lot of people posting like mad. A lot of people kind of falling over themselves to show their value in a work context.
Starting podcasts.
starting podcasts, absolutely. And I suppose it's what it is fundamentally at the heart of things. We're all questioning, what am I doing? How am I leading? What way am I working? What way can I work? And more established methods of, I go to office, I work in office from X time to Y time, I do what I do there, and that's me work there and all that kind of stuff. Like working from home is just different. It's a different dynamic. So I suppose it's exploring, like businesses now, business owners, staff, even industries are looking, going, well, could we do it like that? If you look at kind of from a one-to-one, like a coaching point of view, from a guidance point of view, from a counselor point of view, essentially, really, you could have your office at home, your box room, for example, and you could reach Donegal, Cork, Kerry, anywhere you want, the world, whichever, Mars, Jupiter, whatever, basically, ultimately, you extend your reach. There is a caveat with that of going, okay, I extend my reach. What are my boundaries of availability? So I think the last point that I'm talking about is your value. It's how you show digital leadership, thought leadership, and so on. Some people are repurposing content to show that they're doing something, whether that's to themselves to say, I still have purpose, or whether it is to show the boss or whoever's in charge, look, I'm doing something. I'm still have meaning, value, purpose, and that type of thing. So to recap then, ergonomics, your work-life balance, your access and availability of you as a person, your overall kind of fatigue in learning, your focus fatigue to keep an eye on, and your value.
Brilliant. I'm just conscious of the time there, Steve. So 2 last questions as we finish up. The first one is, I see a load of books behind you there, and I love to ask the guests any good recommendations around literature to read for in relation to leadership or career development or anything at all.
I always take a mix of books. This kind of kills me as a Liverpool fan to say it, but Alex Ferguson's book Leading is quite good. It's done between him and a psychologist that done it. It's called Leading. It reflects on leadership styles, and so on. Belbin has some good resources in relation to team roles, because it's difficult to be leader if you've never been part of a pack. So understanding where your focus and drive comes from as part of a team will sometimes indicate what type of leader you're going to be. So if you're a completer finisher, you're like, let's get this done. You may evolve into very directive in your leadership style. Mm-hmm. If you're a plant, as Belbin calls it, or if you are a facilitator, someone who's like, everybody get together, let's work together, come on, let's do this, let's do that, let's have different roles and so on, and like, let's all work together to get over the finish line. So any good, there's a couple of good websites, I suppose, that I would recommend in terms of everything from time management as a leader, as a person, as a worker. Todoist, todoist.com is quite decent in terms of explaining stuff like the Pomodoro technique, chunking your time into little bits and pieces like that you can work on tasks and so on. Businessballs.com is a good site in relation to working with people, exploring learning, exploring resources, all the way down to kind of different leadership styles and so on, different ways of engaging groups in learning and so on. In terms of education and training and career, careersportal.ie has really good sections in relation to study skills, approaching tasks, and approaching kind of learning and so on, to break a large journey into individual steps and individual milestones and so on, different study techniques and stuff like that. In terms of what I would encourage people to do is reflect on the type of leaders that you admire, the type of person you have been in a team, leaders you liked, leaders you didn't like, leaders you thought were great, leaders you thought you were not great. Um, Likewise, I suppose maybe visualize the type of leader you would like to be, the type of context you would like to be a leader in, So, and I suppose really reflecting on that, when you've kind of reflected on who you want to be, then you're beginning to kind of move towards what opportunities are out there for me. And when you identify that, this is coming back to the where I am, where I'm trying to get to. The opportunities, I suppose, you'll be able to look at the likes of kind of job specs and identify, do I need to develop Prince 2 project management skills? Do I need to develop kind of Scrum Master? Do we need to develop kind of supervisory management skills and or qualifications to move myself closer in alignment to them particular jobs and build my employability and so on?
Mm-hmm. And that actually brings me lovely into my last question. You're right at the coalface of what's happening around career development. Where do you think it's all going to? Let's say 10 years from now, how do you think it's going to have evolved?
In 10 years' time, where will career development be?
Yeah, or like work life in general. If you think about automation, technology, working from home, all that sort of stuff, where do you feel it's leading towards?
I think greater uses of technology. I mean, like a lot of, I suppose, Occam's razor is like, if you look back 10 years, what way were we 10 years ago? Like Zoom wasn't a thing. WhatsApp was barely, a thing. Like Facebook and so on. So there's been a lot of evolution, in relation to the last 10 years. What I would see kind of coming up in the next 10 years, again, this is crystal ball time. I think the opportunity to work from home, the opportunity to telework, as people call it, will become more of the norm. In terms of a culture, we've proved in the last 12 months that we can do it. So I think that will become more of a thing in terms of networking and so on. That will bring its own challenges and opportunities, as everything does, both for a leader and the person that's working as well. It will also bring its positives, in terms of traffic management, in terms of the commute, in terms of people's work-life balance. Where else I see it going? I see the rise of data, big data, use of data, data analysis and so on, and the development in terms of artificial intelligence. The likes of kind of using algorithms and subroutines in relation to exploring elements that we can kind of, in some ways, automate certain processes. In relation to career development, will either of them will the likes of big data or automation replace a human being? No, it never should, because part of career guidance, I suppose, digital guidance, searching online and so on, like through sites, it's important to have that collaboration. If you look at, say, careersportal.ie or myfutureplus.ie or Reach, the different programs that we would have, these are tools that support practice between a guidance counselor, between a education, training, and employment worker and a person. So it complements the work of a person rather than kind of replace it and so on. So where I see things going in 10 years, I think the artificial intelligence of a lot and the actual user interfaces, I see a lot of positive developments, the likes of kind of accessibility and the user experience. I see that becoming more advanced. So it widens the scope of people that can basically kind of better engage with guidance and build their autonomy to use the actual tools and so on. In terms of work, a lot of kind of a lot of the future of work, possibly the jobs that will be here in 10 years' time, haven't even been created yet. You know, so essentially, over the next 10 years, we will be looking at developing skills that we don't even know about now. So we're only at the start of this. 12 months ago, using the whiteboard and Zoom wasn't even a thing.
Yeah.
You know, um, creating kind of integrations of I don't know, a Slido into a PowerPoint to get people to use their Android phone to vote or to engage with a particular PowerPoint slide. That wasn't a very common thing either. So we're constantly kind of running. And to bring it back to your question, in the next 10 years, I would see a lot more use of technology in our work as part of our toolbox, evolving as needed. Using the likes of artificial intelligence to free up time, perhaps more time in a private guidance context. The learner, the client, the student, the person, whichever you want to call them, can engage, I suppose, and use reflective tools to begin to add them jigsaw pieces, values, interests, personality, skills, to add to an overall kind of conversation that they have with you or me, you in a coaching context, in a guidance context, to go, okay, I am a bit more aware of who I am now and where I'm starting out, where my strengths are, where my gaps are, and a bit more aware of where I'm trying to get to and what my opportunities are. Okay, Stephen or Conal or whoever it is, how do I go from here to there? So our leadership style, I suppose, could be over a Zoom. The
Yeah.
person could be in Donegal or Clare or Cork or Kerry or whatever. We're sitting like this talking to them. They've done the assessments that have been kind of developed and so on, and the reflective tools, the likes of I Want Future Plus.ie. And from that, then we have a conversation and we begin a journey of walking side by side.
Very good. So it's
You
it's
know,
about that combination as well. Great stuff, Stephen. Intriguing chat. Honestly, I'm so grateful for the time and the wealth of knowledge that you shared with us as well has been hugely beneficial. I'm just going to check in on a couple of points that you shared, but I think have also been common through all the other conversations I've had over the last couple of weeks. So, first of all, with your own journey, it was about being agile and adaptable and continuously building on the knowledge, but people was at the center of it. And then you spoke about career guidance, and from a leadership perspective, what was coming through there was about leveraging all the tools that are at your disposal to help the client or the person on your team to make the right decision for them. But ultimately, it's up to them. And we spoke about the leadership styles that are there. And the core thing there around the three styles that you mentioned for me is balance and situational leadership, being able to lean into what is necessary at that particular time.
yeah,
Then working from home, huge topic at the moment, and as you said, it's going to even become more apparent over the coming years when companies move to that. And you give us some fantastic tips around that, and then around the resources that are available. You touched on Alex Ferguson, and you mentioned a number of websites. What I'll do is I'll share those websites in the show notes as well, if you want to share them with me too, Stephen. So look, thanks a million for your time. Great chatting with you, and we might talk to you again.
down. Take care.
Good man. Thanks a million, Stephen, for taking part. That was an intriguing conversation. And as I said prior to the chat, so delighted that we got the opportunity to record it because we've been talking like that several times on the doorstep. Thanks everyone for listening in as usual. Hope you have a lovely week. Enjoy the good weather. And remember, whatever you're doing this week, get involved.